Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Monday, April 15th, 2013 to order. We are going to begin with a moment of silence for a fallen firefighter, Brian Page. It's with deep regret and heartfelt sadness that we learned of the passing of Brian Page on Wednesday, April 3rd, at the age of 30. Brian was a Pelham firefighter with Station Number 1 and served the town since 2005. He was the loving husband of Jennifer and dear and devoted father to Lindsay. Lovingly missed by his parents Rick and Brenda and his brother Bradley, and dear son-in-law of Roger and Debbie Lindsay, and brother-in-law to Susan McGlynn and Patty Okrafka. Brian was a paramedic with the Emergency Health Services of Nova Scotia and recently graduated from the Ontario College of Health and Technology. I understand that Brian always dreamed of being a firefighter and realized that goal, as I mentioned, in 2005. And he was one of the first of the Pelham firefighters to be certified by the province in a firefighter survival program. And as a dedicated and passionate professional, was constantly trying to improve his skills. He was in the officer development program and working toward his next goal of becoming a fire officer. While Brian was an avid golfer and hockey player, he loved nothing more than playing with his daughter, Lindsay. His service to the community was honored on Thursday, April 4th, by hundreds of firefighters from across Niagara and Ontario during a fire service walkthrough at the funeral home. His funeral service took place on Saturday, April 6th at Pedlar's Funeral Home, and the members and vehicles of the Pelham Fire Service provided both an escort to and an honor guard for Brian on his way to the internment at Pleasant View Cemetery. In honor of Brian's service, the town provided a donation to his daughter to the Lindsay's Trust Fund, and we also flew our town flags at half-mast. Now I would ask all to rise and have a moment of silence in memory of Brian Page. Thank you. Now I would ask that Councillor Durley lead us in an invocation, followed by the singing of the national anthem led by Ms. Bizzato. Councillor?
Dear God, who has given us grace to make our common goals unto thee, and who does promise that when two or more are gathered unto thy name, you will grant their requests. Fulfill now, O Lord, the petitions of thy servants, as may be expected of them. Grant all in his council chambers the knowledge of trust, justice, and honor in all considerations placed before them. Provide us in this chamber, O Lord, strong minds and discerning spirits as we deliberate over the business of our town, that we move forever forward to ensure the town of Pelham continues to be a vibrant, caring, and creative community. May God bless all in our community and grant us in this chamber the wisdom, will, and generosity to guide the town of Pelham through the challenges and successes that lie ahead. Amen.
Amen.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all thy sons command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Ms. Bizzotto. Thank you all. First on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a seconder for this? Counselor Clark, Counselor King will second that. So it has been moved by Counselor Clark, seconded by Counselor King, that the agenda for the April 15th, 2013 regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any changes to the agenda? I do have one, and I would ask a counselor to move this. It's under my report, so I'm taking a report away. So I'm sure a member of council will approve that or want to do that. It's regarding the Riel Skate Park donation from Fenwick United Church. It wasn't available this Sunday when I went, so it will be coming soon. So Councillor Clark and Councillor King would move an amendment that we don't have that on the agenda. I would call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Any other changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question on the agenda as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried as amended. We'll note that. Thank you. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Do any members have any pecuniary interest they'd like to or need to disclose at this time? Can that be noted that there was none? The next item is a public meeting regarding the stopping up, closing, and conveying part of a public road allowance between lots 19 and 20, concession 10 from Foss Road to approximately 500 meters north of Foss Road. Notice has been given that the town of Pelham proposes to enact a bylaw to stop up, close, and sell a portion of the unopened road allowance between lots 19 and 20, concession 10 from Foss Road to approximately 500 meters north of Foss Road, in accordance with the procedures established under the closing and disposal of municipal road allowances policy. This public meeting has been established to find out whether there's any comments or questions from members of the public before council proceeds with this action. I would ask if there are any members of the public present that would like to comment on that they come up to the podium at this time and make their comment. When you come to the podium, I would ask that you would give your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mark Brzezinski, and I reside at 1003 Church Street in Fenwick. This road allowance is partly split between the Brzezinskis and the Langendunes. And on this property that I own with my sister-in-law, there happens to be a big old oak tree. Now, it's just a tree, but I had a core sample done, and it's approximately 450 years old. And before the town makes their final decision, I would like them to consider that this road allowance in the future could be an access to a future heritage site or some kind of park around that tree. And we all can't predict the future on how long that tree will be there, but I think it's worthwhile giving it some thought on whether we want to have access to a tree or not. Whether it gets sold, I'll benefit from it because naturally I'll absorb some of the property that I'll buy from the town. But I would just like them to consider this and have all options before they make a decision. And possibly to have a meeting with all parties, myself, my sister-in-law, who's not here, the Langendunes, and the town, to decide what the future is for this tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brzezinski. There might be a question for you. Are questions allowed at a public meeting, Madam Clerk? questions might, so members of council may have a question for you if you're amenable to answering any questions. Thank you. Councillor Durley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this tree sits right on the road allowance, does it?
No, it's in approximately 200 feet from the road allowance.
Okay, so it's not on what we're stopping.
It's on my
up.
property.
It's on your property. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Others? Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate your coming to the public meeting. Are there any others that would like to comment during this portion of the public meeting? Are there any others for a final time? Can that be noted that there was just one? And I would call that this portion of the, here we are, is this, we have this here? So I close the public meeting, is that correct?
That's just to receive information.
Okay, so the public meeting is now closed, and I do have a motion
Want to receive the verbal report?
to receive the verbal report. Is there a seconder for this? I have Councillor Clark making the motion. Councillor Durley will second that. That the information received regarding the public meeting for the stopping up, closing, and conveying part of a road allowance between lots 19 and 20, concession 10, Foss Road, approximately 500 meters north of Foss Road, be received. And it was Mr. Mark Brzezinski. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. I note that the bylaw is much later on the agenda, and council will, under 19.4, if you have your agendas there, and that's where, and 19.5, 19.6, and that's when council will deal with this matter. Thank you for that. Next on the agenda is hearing of presentations, delegations, and also a report from our regional councillor. And first on that is Mr. David Allen from the Allen Group regarding the East Fond Hill Lands Development. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Allen. I would ask that you present to us from the podium here. Town staff have put up this particular drawing to assist members of the community in understanding the lands to which you're going to be speaking about. Maybe I'll just describe that for members of the public that are here to assist you with this. North is at the top, that's Regional Road 20, kind of crossing the top. Rice Road is along the right side, and at sort of the bottom there, maybe Mr. Mantle or the fire chief, you can point it out, there's Port Robinson Road. So it's right there, and then on the other side over there for members of the public. So the portion that Mr. Allen will be speaking about will be generally the portion in purple, his lands, and also the town lands that which is in the red. So, I don't know if you want to add anything to that as you address us, Mr. Allen. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Augustin. I've got some prepared remarks I'll go through first, and then if there's any questions afterwards, I'll be pleased to do my best to answer them.
Thank you.
It's been approximately 8 years since the purchase of the lands that will become the site of a project that over the coming years will develop into an exciting mixture of private and public uses. Council's decision to embrace the concept of a master site plan that integrates these uses in the most appropriate way rather than following arbitrary property boundaries is an innovative first step. Tonight I would like to provide an update on the status of some of the users that we are dealing with on the private side and give you a few thoughts on the process itself. To start with, I'll talk about Baybridge Seniors Housing. Baybridge Seniors Housing has expressed a strong interest in locating a major facility within the boundaries of the master plan. Baybridge is a wholly owned unit of the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan and will bring to the development enormous credibility in terms of financial strength and expertise in designing and building state-of-the-art seniors and retirement facilities. The senior management of Baybridge has many years of experience in the management of aging-in-place residential developments. I know some of you have already met Robert Easer, the Executive Vice President of Baybridge, and I think you'll agree has a very compelling vision of how modern seniors projects should work. Baybridge is currently planning as a first phase a 3 to 4 story building of approximately 120 units which will also include a memory floor and approximately 12 townhouses for more independent living that will have access to the facilities and programs of the main building. The concept of a tight integration of a community center with their seniors building is exciting to Bay Bridge and hopefully to the town. Now that the town has made the decision to proceed with the master site plan process, I would anticipate that plans that have been a little short of detail will come into a sharper focus as we go ahead. The second major component is the participation of the Little Lake Medical Group. Little Lake is currently proposing a mixed-use medical building of approximately 40,000 square feet and is based on the facility that it has under construction in Barrie. Doctors Dave Boucher and Rob Heckenberg are currently working in the Niagara area to bring together the many users and government bodies, both public and private, that are involved in a project such as this. This will be an integrated healthcare building featuring a wide range of physician services and programs. In addition, it is anticipated the facility will attract other professionals such as accountants and lawyers to service the physicians as well as members of the wider community. Meetings have been held with the Ministry of Health, the local LHIN, and area physicians to get their feedback on the Little Lake proposal, and the responses to date have been almost universally positive. In the coming months, the scope of these services will also come into sharper focus as Little Lake moves forward in conjunction with the development of the master site plan. I'd also like to point out that Bay Bridge is part of the Little Lake development in Barrie, and Robert Easer was instrumental in facilitating the early discussions with Drs. Boucher and Heckenberg. On the commercial retail side, Fonthill Gardens, which is us, we've had numerous expressions of interest from both major and minor retailers in the East Fonthill secondary plan development. It is our expectation, now that the town and ourselves have decided to proceed on a master site plan, that we can turn casual interest into firm commitment. I'll keep staff and elected officials up to date as these commitments are finalized and we move forward. I want to say a few words now about the process that lies ahead. In order to bring the master site plan from a planning exercise to reality within the time frames we've set out, there's a lot of work to do. Legal agreements, site planning, engineering studies, and a myriad number of other tasks must be identified, undertaken, and most importantly, completed in a timely way. Fortunately, I believe that we share with the town of Pelham a common vision of how this unique and exciting opportunity can be brought to fruition. This development has the potential to be an exciting example of private-public collaboration to achieve a common goal, a vibrant and exciting new development that will integrate with the existing residential and commercial infrastructure of Fonthill in a seamless way. To date, I'm encouraged by the cooperation, flexibility, innovative ideas, and effort that senior staff and political leadership have brought to the table. So just in summary, we're looking forward to the process and eagerly anticipating the results. So if there's any questions, I'll do my best to deal with them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. Appreciate your comments as well, and working together with you through this process. As you said, it's been a number of years, but most recently over the last number of months, pulling it together to this point. I wonder if members of council have questions. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Allen. First of all, thank you for updating us on this. Very detailed in some of the steps that are coming through. For those of us that have been involved from the beginning, it's truly light at the end of the tunnel. We hope that things will go well, and there is a little bit of confusion that has happened due to a couple of articles that appeared in a newspaper, and there's a public conception that you're going into the ground tomorrow type of thing, which I believe your presentation here definitely states different things to go on, but could you perhaps give us just a few of the next steps that you may have to go through in order to see that everything is in place, all the hoops are jumped through?
I think the next step is to identify what the next steps are. And that's really where we are. We're at the beginning of this process. I think we see, in general terms, the road ahead that we have decided on, and we have to start to dig in now and do the studies and the agreements and everything else that will be required to implement all these ideas we have. I don't think we are married. I don't think we're even engaged yet, but I think we've identified a concept that if we can bring it together, will have great benefits for the town and ourselves as well.
Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you,
Further?
Mr. Allen. And like I say, most of what I've heard has been, or say, all of what I heard has been very positive. However, there was that misconception. I'm sure you have cleared that up this evening. I thank you very much for that, sir.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Other questions for Mr. Allen? Thank you very much. I think those are all the questions, other than to say, again, thank you. We appreciate the update. As you see in the gallery, there are some number of people here that are very interested in this moving forward. Just to echo Councillor Durley's comments, you know, all the feedback that I've received has been very positive. People are very excited about this. And, you know, I would say, as I'm sure Council would, as you said, the challenge is to integrate it all into the existing community and make sure that it's a win-win for everyone. So very, very exciting opportunity ahead of us. So thank you very much for giving us that flavor of what is coming, and we look forward to working together with you in the future to make it a reality.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. Appreciate it. I do have a motion to receive the presentation, and it has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Clark, that the information presented by David Allen of the Allen Group regarding the East Fawn Hill lands development be received for information. Any further discussion to that? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next, we have a delegation from Pelham Cares regarding their 30 years of service in our community. We have 3 members representing Pelham Cares who are here this evening. First is Carolyn, I had your name down here, so Toffolo, Jane Gilmore, and Betty Brown. Sorry about that, Caroline. And I believe the clerk is just helping you. Are you?
I think we're all set for whoever is.
Would you like to speak first? And
are you ready for this? Oh,
No,
okay.
you don't do this first. I'll talk first and then
And who's going to do that?
Betty.
thank you, Mr. Allen. Take care.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Caroline Toffolo.
Just a sec, if
Can
you
I
would.
just-
Some folks are
Oh,
leaving. Just
well, I guess you should stay around for our
well,
presentation. eh?
there's lots on the agenda tonight.
Yeah,
so.
right. Okay. Good evening. My name is Caroline Toffolo, and I'm a volunteer with Pelham Cares. I serve as secretary to the board of directors and as convener of the Pelham Cares Archives Project Committee. Now, Pelham Cares, as you know, is a significant part of the fabric of our community and has been so for 30 years. I am here this evening to share with you information that I reported at our annual general meeting in March about the origins of Pelham Cares. Last fall, the Pelham Cares Archives Project Committee was formed, and that includes Don Butler, Gail Hillier, and myself. We have met several times since last September with the purpose of not only organizing and storing the Pelham Cares archival material appropriately, but to also create a narrative of how Pelham Cares began and how it has evolved over the last 30 years. We extend our sincere thank you and appreciation to Eleanor Fisher and George Kowalski, members of Pelham Cares, for the materials they gave to Pelham Cares in order that the Archives Committee can put together the story of Pelham Cares for everyone to read. Now, I would like to share with you what the Archives Committee discovered about the historical roots of Pelham Cares, in other words, how Pelham Cares formed. It all began back in 1982, April the 7th, when Eric Bergenstein, the then mayor of Pelham, received a letter from Janet Hassel, a social worker with Niagara Regional Home Care, requesting that a social service committee be formed in Pelham to act as a resource to the home care program. This means that if an agency had a particular need not being met by existing programs, then the Social Service Committee would attempt to mobilize community resources to meet that need. She went on to say that other communities in the region had social service committees composed of church parishioners representing each denomination in the community. She gave examples of the kinds of needs a social service committee would address, such as visiting a patient confined to home, transporting patients to doctor's appointments, spending half a day a week with an elderly person who requires supervision, etc. Now, Eric responded by informing Canon J. Now of the Holy Trinity Anglican Church about the letter, and this resulted in a second letter now sent to the Pelham Clergy Fellowship, dated 1982, May 10th, signed by Eric and Canon Now, referencing Janet Hassel's letter and stating, and I quote, "We would like to work with churches and other suitable groups to bring into being a social service committee in Pelham." The letter went on to outline the steps needed to implement such a proposal. Following this letter came another one from Eric, dated 1982, May 14th, and it was sent to the churches and different service organizations, announcing a meeting to be held 1982, June 17th, asking them to send representatives to this meeting to hear how social service committees were functioning in other parts of the region. The meeting was chaired by Eric. The following made presentations: Janet Hassel, Margaret Anderson of Newark Neighbours Niagara-on-the-Lake, Doreen Hutchinson, Community Care West Lincoln Grimsby, and Robert McDowell, Community Legal Services. Others present also contributed ideas. Additional meetings in June, also chaired by Eric Bergenstein and attended by those interested in pursuing this initiative, produced the following. They formed a steering committee, and that steering committee consisted of Audrey Barton, Eleanor Fisher, Diane Hubbard, Reverend Keith Tudor, Ellen Herbison, Ken Dutton, Phyllis Stone, Reverend Robert Sinclair, Jim Davis, Eric Bergenstein, and Peter Geddard. They also selected the name for the committee, Pelham Cares. They listed the services to be offered, which would include transportation in emergencies or regularly to those who have none, visit with the lonely, the shut-ins at home, the hospital, or take them on an outing, run errands for those who are stuck, step in emergencies or regularly to free a parent or spouse who can't otherwise get a break. In emergencies, provide food, clothing, furniture, medicine, and other necessities. They defined the need for a board of directors with an elected or appointed executive. And at this point, they decided not to put those people in position because they didn't know each other very well. So they let it go on a little later into the fall. They defined a process to recruit volunteers and how to train them. They also determined the office equipment they would need, how to raise money to cover expenses, and they developed a list of all the services in the community for referral. This information was sent out to all the organizations in Pelham that had indicated interest in the formation of the Social Service Committee, and I quote, respectfully ask them to sponsor this endeavor and appoint your representative to the board of directors. And I'll just pause here by saying, for any of you who have worked on committees, and I'm sure all of you have, you know that it's very difficult to get innovative ideas through and everyone to agree. And it takes time to do this. They had this committee in place by the end of June from a letter that was received April the 7th of that year. It's amazing, I think, so something to keep in mind. Anyway, subsequent meetings held in the fall through November and December and chaired by Eric Bergenstein resulted in an organized list of volunteers and guidelines for them. They had about 50 people at that point that were volunteering for Pelham Cares. They opened a bank account. They formed 2 subcommittees, one chaired by Ruth Leggett to establish what services were already available in Pelham, and the other, a client referral subcommittee chaired by Eleanor Fisher. They had a draft constitution, which was amended later in the fall and in subsequent months. They defined the geographical boundaries of service, and they set the date for their first official meeting, their annual meeting. And this first official and annual meeting of Pelham Cares was held 1983, January the 12th, 30 years ago. The following executive was nominated and elected. Chairperson Phyllis Stone, Vice Chairperson Eric Bergenstein, Recording Secretary Barbara Robinson, Corresponding Secretary Ellen Herbison, Treasurer Ken Dunton. And we say that this is Pelham Care's 30th anniversary. Even though the beginning started in 82, the first official meeting was held in 83. And we are now 30 years later and going strong. Now, before I finish, I feel I have to say something special about Eric Bergenstein. In my view, he was the architect of Pelham Cares regarding its formation. He took the idea of a social service committee for Pelham, and through communication with the churches and service organizations, led interested volunteers to develop a vision of how the committee would function. He laid the foundation by bringing in knowledgeable people as references, planning and sharing the meetings, and communicating the process of development to the group at large. In an informed, organized manner, he facilitated the path that allowed the steering committee to devise strategies to make the vision of Pelham Cares a reality. Now that is the story of Pelham Cares through 1982 to the beginning of 1983. The Archives Committee is presently working on archival material from the 80s and will ultimately develop an account of the history of Pelham Cares to the present day for people to read. Now that concludes my presentation. Now we are going to enjoy a very professionally constructed PowerPoint presentation that Betty Brown, our Coordinator Client Services, and Beth Cotter, our Office Receptionist, put together using the donated materials of Eleanor and George to show the history of Pelham Cares over the last 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the sound's on.
We're trying to get some sound here, so.
Just need the volume level on your computer needs to be turned on, so wherever that is. Go to the screen.
Looks like we need a 12-year-old to help us here. No sound? Okay. Well, thank you for trying.
Supposed to just keep going. I don't know why it stopped. Sorry.
Reversity of inanimate objects.
There we go. Thanks, Betty. So you're on one that you want to go. Again, I think we should give a round of applause. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Betty. I was going to apologize for you that we couldn't get the sound working, so I did have the chance to hear it at Pelham Care's 30th anniversary or AGM, and it was very moving as well with the sound. So thank you very much for putting that together and sharing that with us. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's wonderful to see the commitment, the generosity, the vision that was there for Pelham Cares all those years for the community really coming together. And also, Ms. Toffolo, very, very interesting to hear again the beginnings of Pelham Cares and your comments about how quickly the community reacted to it, and led by Eric Bergenstein. And obviously there was recognized that there was a need and that was the right thing to do, and the community really embraced it. And all these years from now, 30 years later, Pelham Cares, as you said, is so strong and so vibrant and so needed in our community. So thank you very much for that and for your presentation. I do want to comment. I know that there's others, including a counselor, that is in some of the pictures. And others that are here in the room this evening that are in those photos. So obviously, so many hands have been involved in Pelham Cares to benefit the community. And on behalf of council, I want to say thank you very much for your ongoing commitment. We wish you 30 more years and beyond to continue to help the community. So thank you again for your presentation and for bringing us up to date on the early days and also sharing the slideshow. Thank you so much. So I will, I don't think, do members of council have any questions? Okay, so I do have a motion to receive. And again, apologies to you for the audio not working. It has been moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the information presented by Caroline Toffolo, Jane Gilmore, and Betty Brown regarding Pelham Care's 30 years of service be received for information. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you again for your presentation, and very, very moving. Thank you again. Next, we have the report from Regional Councillor Brian Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for joining us, Councillor.
Members of council and staff, and if you will permit me just a brief liberty here. What perhaps is not known, at the time that Port Cares was being formed, I was the Rector's Warden with Canada at Holy Trinity, and sat on Parish Council with Eric Bergenstein. And it's not only that that organization had an impact on this community, it led me to become a community leader in Port Colborne, where I was principal at the time, to form the Port Cares organization. So the power and influence wasn't just within the boundaries of the town of Pelham. It was also inspirational for the people in Port Colborne at a very difficult time at the end of the 1990s or 80s recession. So,
yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor, for telling us that. Thank you.
This is a report for the council meeting tonight, which is the matter that is coming before Regional Council this Thursday evening. In other words, the committee meetings that met last week. In corporate services, we had a presentation regarding a business case for a new financial management system. It's a very expensive upgrade, and we looked in particular for the updating with what the return on investment might be. We Received a presentation from Niagara Regional Police with respect to the St. Catharines facility and a communication from Mayor McMullen on the issue. As you're probably aware, the city would like it to remain a 6-to-8 church, whereas the police at the moment are looking at next to the ambulance station next to the Hotel View parking lots area. Approved the initiation of the 2013 capital budget for some of the projects for Niagara Regional Police in the amount of $44,000, and approved the initiation of the 2013 capital budget for public works in excess, just shy of $9 million in total. Received and approved a report with respect to the Joint Board of Management, Niagara Region Courts. I bring this to your attention because that report will be coming to this council, and it talks about recommendations of potential sites for the location of the Provincial Offences Act courts as we move to the consolidation in the near future. Integrated Community Planning Committee, we received and approved an application for tourism exemption for holiday openings from the Freshco food store, the new store in Niagara Falls next to the Americana. Received a report, a very interesting presentation and report regarding lakefront enhancement strategy, early findings, and we're looking for an implementation report on that coming later in the fall. The report has two directions. One is to look, first of all, at lakefront acquisition, potential ways of doing that, incentives that can be used to ensure that we don't lose the very precious access that we do have already. Two sites in the past we were unsuccessful in maintaining, the Marcy's Woods project in terms of Fort Erie as well as the Easter Seals Camp in Wainfleet. So we're looking at ways and means to maintain or perhaps enhance that, and that will be followed some years into it by all waterfront access, not just the lakefront. Received delegations and then received a report regarding an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board directed the Region Council not to support the appeal regarding property in Niagara Falls. Basically, the property abuts a very large, extensive industrial tract, but it's surrounded by residential properties. Historically, it had been designated as residential. We heard from the former mayor of Niagara Falls as well as a developer for the site, and basically did not follow through on the staff's recommendation to continue to the OMB. We received and adopted the final recommendation report on Regional Policy Plan Amendment number 5, 2012, to implement new environmental impact study guidelines. That's hopefully to streamline the process, to try and get rid of the duplication or the conflicting processes from the various agencies and levels of government. We received and authorized a policy and issuing report on the Regional Policy Plan Amendment number 1, 2013, regarding this community's urban boundary modifications for Font Hill and the property that you just looked at in terms of the screen. Move to implement a paper-light environment by the completion of the council chamber renovation later this year. Your mayor is a leader in that regard already in terms of using technology as opposed to what's referred to as the Blue Book. It's a very voluminous volume, and I think they talked about 11,000 trees or 1,100 trees that we'll save by not having that being produced. I've been sitting on a committee, by the way, looking at some of the new modern software for use of technology, and there are things you can write annotations, you can write notes on the computer screen, probably an iPad. It could be Windows 8, but iPad is the more common usage. And they're even looking at the integration of voice annotation in terms of note material. Plus search modifications. The Blue Book is a very large document, but there will be capability to do keyword searches and so on to be able to fast access it, as well as the potential for online voting in terms of recording votes by people electronically. So, interesting era that's in front of us. Request the regional chair to ask that the negotiations ongoing between the federal government and the St. Lawrence Seaway Corporation include reference to, but be not limited to, the canal side leases, in particular for the Greater Niagara Circle route, the Port Robinson ferry issue in terms of its ongoing longevity, the transport of GO Rail over Lock 4, and the concern for the eventual full-time GO Transit to Niagara, as well as canal side lands economic development. In public health and social services, we received a report with respect to public health, the support for vulnerable children and youth, and that came as a result of a request for funding from the Child Advocacy Center of Niagara Region, and we took several supportive positions. The issue with it's a wonderful program. In Niagara, we're the leader in Ontario, in Canada, in terms of having a one-stop case where children are interviewed, videotaped, rather than being interviewed by the police and then perhaps by medical practitioners and then by lawyers and so on. It's extremely effective. It's far less stress on the family and the individual children in particular. And it really should be a model that should be supported, in our opinion, by federal and provincial funding. So we're working in whatever way. They wanted they wanted a $50,000 a year funding from public health. And the concept we have is with public health is that while we respect the mental health aspect of this, it's not really our territory. It's not our mandate. There are over 200 and some different children agencies who could also line up and say, we'd like some money as well from the regional taxpayer. I'll give an example, the Children's Safety Village, which is an excellent program. But it's one that basically is funded in all areas of the province, not by the local taxpayer, but by various other funding sources. So it's a difficult matter for a program that's very, very successful and innovative in terms of the treatment of young children who are suffering from abuse. We received a report recommending a regional policy with respect to a bylaw to regulate smoking in outdoor public space and referred the matter to local council for comment. The area, when it comes to your attention, the area that has been of some concern for people around this committee, which I chair, is the fact that while they understand it in the concept of arenas, they understand it in the concept of playing fields, they're having difficulty with the enforceability on beaches and on trail systems. In terms of like even walking through our own Marnie Street Park and so on. The park and the baseball diamond, I think people can see that as a contained area, but for someone going on a hike or a stroll down to the Lathrop property and so on, where is the possibility of enforceability on that? So that's the concern that's been expressed. You may or may not support it the way it is or have some recommendations. So we're taking that cool off time to make certain we get that feedback because it will require triple majority for passing. It's not something that's simply a regional bylaw. It's something that has to be supported by at least half the communities in Niagara with over 50% of the population. So it's something that's going to probably take close to a year to get to the point of implementation. So far, 3 communities have very strongly asked for it. And wanted it to be regional as opposed to a local bylaw. Received report and authorized implementation of Phase 4 of the Local Immigration Partnership Strategy, LIP, subject to funding of $168,000 from Citizenship and Immigration Canada, including funding for 1 full-time equivalent non-union staff member. And finally, received several information reports, including the upcoming events to celebrate volunteerism in our long-term care facilities. I don't normally include information reports in my package to you because they're quite lengthy, but this one I did because the dates begin, I think it is this week on Wednesday or Thursday. Unfortunately, I can't attend that. I'm on an escarpment commission meeting, but it's a case where between the middle of this week and the end of next week, there will be events at all long-term care homes. And Mr. Mayor, you may want to inform council of the one for the one in our community.
Yeah.
In terms of that.
Woodlands, I think, is on the 23rd.
Okay, I'll expect it to be
22nd.
communicated by the clerk's office, so people are interested in attend. I really strongly, co-chair, so I have some bragging rights, but I strongly encourage people on occasion to not only go attend the ones in their own community, but to attend others in other communities, such as Rapelje and so on, because there's a uniqueness about each of our long-term care homes, and there's a creativity that's present. It's not an institutional setting. It is very much a sense of family, and they do a superb job. We are able to claim almost a 1-to-1 volunteer to resident ratio between our programs at our long-term care centers as well as the community programs that are offered. Quite significant. And those that argue for, the government says we only have to have 1 long-term care home, I don't think we'd have that high volunteer ratio if only 1 home was located somewhere in Niagara. Public Works Committee received a presentation respecting the parking on Ferry Street in Niagara Falls near Napoli Restaurant and Pizzeria. And there's a letter from another pizzeria that did not support that request, but we did approve an amended recommendation to reinstate the parking that had formerly been available on Ferry Street with some modifications, I believe, a slight amendment to what had been in the past. Received a presentation for a request for relief from development charges for property in the town of Lincoln. We subsequently approved that request. And we approved the 2013 First Phase Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Program, just shy of $4 million in total. Received a load capacity evaluation of the St. Paul West CNR Bridge near the old station, the view station, and posted a 13-ton limit until the bridge is either rehabilitated or replaced. And we approved the temporary reopening of the Bridge Street landfill site. I believe that's Wainfleet. I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, it must mention in the report. But
No, it's Fort Erie.
What's Fort Erie? Okay, thank you for that. Which will operate until the remaining approved landfill capacity is exhausted. Approved a recommendation to provide a seniors ride-free day on regional transit this May 27th, 2013. And received a report on the Interregional Gateway Corridors Initiative. A municipal caucus informally endorsed the shared principles developed by that. Those are a lot of words, but basically what we've done is we've taken leadership to reach out to other communities around the Golden Horseshoe to look at our common needs for transportation. And this is linked with the next report with regard to the Niagara GTA study. We very strongly, as a council, are supportive of HOV lanes on the Queen Elizabeth from the 406 to the Grimsby-St. Catharines boundary. We are strongly against the significant proposed expansion of the Queen Elizabeth and the best farmland in Canada. We are strongly in support, the government is supporting an east corridor that basically would look at the widening of the 140, would look at a connector between the Main Street area in Welland to the Peace Bridge. But we believe that the next route is, instead of expanding the Queen Elizabeth to end the promise in 3 years there still will be weekend gridlock, is to instead go to the more environmentally friendly thing, and that is once you've got the east connector to the Peace Bridge, then make the 406 connected probably somewhere in the vicinity of the John Munro Airport. There are very significant diagrams and corridors that are being shown by our Commissioner of Public Works. There'll be a strong presence at the Niagara Week presentation in the first week of May this year. We think it's a wiser use of money, a wiser use of dollars. It's going to lead to far more streamlined transportation of goods and services. It would probably turn the gateway proposal of the Gateway Economic Center and Zone into a reality, providing the indication to business and industry that there is a viable means, a 4-lane highway, to connect that area, as I say, up near the John Munro Airport. We are falling back off the escarpment crossing. That's been the big block with Halton, and we're looking instead for connecting with the 403 and the 401 corridors. So I won't read all the material that's in the last bullet because I think I covered it verbally. Regional Council then meets this Thursday at 6:30 in open session with a closed session to follow.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Beatty, for your very comprehensive report. Again, I do want to just highlight one item that councillors around this table might be concerned with and may not know yet. It will be coming to us before any action is taken, and that is a proposal to realign the urban boundary. So it says urban boundary modifications for Fawn Hill and the town of Pelham. There's a discrepancy between the town's urban boundary areas and the region and what they have designated. And I think this came about or was identified as both were working through our official plan and those kind of things. So I know staff, the CAO has a copy of it. It will be coming to our table to get our opinion. I think my understanding of it is housekeeping, and I think the difference is something like 6 hectares or acres, I'm not even sure which, but it's very small in terms of the lines. So moving one line this way or moving that line that way to compensate between what's built on the ground and what the urban boundary is. In some cases, what's built is actually outside of the town's urban boundary, and so the boundary line would change and what's not built. Anyways, you'll see it when you get it, but I view it as housekeeping. I don't know if you saw that as well, Councillor, when you saw it. So it will be coming here for our information shortly.
All this, President, Mr. Mayor, is it being brought to our attention now, rather than when your official plan was approved?
I'm not sure why that's the case. I think it said as they were reviewing the official plan, this came up. It may have been, I don't know if Mr. Jennings has any knowledge of this. He doesn't, he's shaking his head, but I think it may have been as the province took a look at both plans. So, yeah, the paper light environment, of course, we all have our iPads here, so we are paperless, not never mind paper light already. So I look forward to that, Councillor, and for highlighting that. Thank you. I wonder if members of council have any questions for Councillor Beatty. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Beatty. I noticed the first bullet under integrated community planning where a new grocery store in Niagara Falls received a tourist exemption. Oddly enough, I was approached by a retailer in the town of Pelham. It says, although we are not at the border, a tourist center per se, it is a route that people go from and to an area, and they were wondering if in fact how they might go about trying to get that same type of consideration, because there were some challenges about the closed on statutory holiday days and all that good stuff. And I just wonder if there is a possibility that someone from, let's say, the town of Pelham, or someone perhaps one step away from the defined tourist area, that they can be given this consideration.
They may apply for it. I find it a bit awkward that we are the arbitrator on this issue, to be quite honest, as opposed to the province. I've had, and it may be the same business person in town, talking about the fact of the impact of cross-border shopping, and why don't we have this blanket capability throughout all of Niagara. We've had one person who's a resident of our community, but has interest in a Shoppers Drug Mart in Port Dalhousie, and if I recall correctly, that was turned down. But it's hard to justify when you know what the alternative is. And in particular, when we in Niagara are going to be holding the largest consumer outlet mall in Canada shortly, across from White Oaks, the question is, why this area as opposed to retailer A, B, or C? We have gone through, I would say, Mr. Mayor, probably half dozen to 9 individual applications. They're very difficult because you do not have a defined tourist area. And one of the areas of concern, which when we brought it up before, is that employees are not being coerced into this. This is something that is optional on their partners, whether they wish to participate on those days. But it's a case. The question ought to be asked: why not a blanket policy for all of Niagara?
If I might add to that, Councillor, there is the way that legislation is defined, it's within I believe it's 2 kilometer. That's what the area is. So within a 2 kilometer area, back from a major, whatever that means, tourist attraction. So in the case of Niagara Falls, everybody knows what that is, and there is a clearly defined sort of area. But in other situations, when other retailers from other parts of Niagara have come forward to Regional Council, they've tried to make the case, and as Councillor Beatty indicated, in one case it wasn't successful, but they tried to make the case that whatever it was a tourist gathering place or a tourist interest, and therefore they needed to be open. So that's part of it, and perhaps we can endeavor to get the information.
And the part that makes it complicated, Councillor, is the fact that we don't have the traditional definitions of businesses anymore. We've got grocery stores that are becoming pharmacies. We've got a Canadian Tire that's becoming a grocery store. We've got a drugstore that's becoming a grocery store. So it's not quite as defined as it used to be 10 or 15 years ago. And as I say, I've had the question, why not a universal one? But there needs to be some work on the part of the Chambers of Commerce to make a position paper in that regard and to attempt to move it forward. I honestly don't know today whether a blanket one would apply or whether you still have to itemize and list every separate business. My guess is at the moment you do have to list every separate one.
Okay, thank you.
I think just further to that, with the Fond Hill Game or the Comfort Maple, we have 2 tourist attractions. So if that's the case, then there could be a case to be built. Exactly.
Thank you. Others? Okay, thank you very much for your comprehensive report. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and we'll see you Thursday.
Well, there's a number of reports here that are coming to this council, like the smoking ban, et cetera, so we look forward to that. Yes, on Thursday. We'll see you there.
I'll be a bit tired. I've got a 2-day escarpment commission meeting before it, so.
Make sure you wear your cowboy boots. All right, thank you, Councillor.
Hey, take care.
Our next item has been moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the minutes of the council meeting of April 2nd, 2013 be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. That motion is carried. The next item, over here, I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you, is consent agenda items to be considered in block. We do have those items together, a number of items, and I wonder if councillors have any items that they would like to lift for separate consideration. Since there is none, I will proceed to read this. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Clark. The following consent agenda items be received and approved. 13.1, the recommendations arising from the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 2nd, 2013, and the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of that, which is called the COW 06, 2013. 13.3, information correspondence items. We have 5. The first was from the Niagara Central Airport Commission regarding an airport update. Some very exciting news there. Item 2 was the Niagara Regional Property Assessment Review and Corporate Services Committee tax policy recommendations. Number 3 was the City of Welland, a resolution regarding interest arbitration. Number 4 was the Fenwick Anniversary Committee minutes of March 14th, 21st, and 28th, 2013. And the 5th was the Summerfest Committee minutes of March 27th. And then 2 other items, the staff reports for information, an HR policy development timeline, and a sidewalk encroachment procedure application and permit process. Any discussion on any of those items? I saw Councillor Ribbiak and then Councillor Durley. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment with regard to the HR policy development timeline. I wonder whether we can hear something with regard to how it was developed and.
Mr. CEO? Or is that the treasurer? Madam Treasurer, can you assist the councillor, please?
The HR, I'm trying to bring it up on my screen here. The policy was developed by the consultants that is working with the town of Pelham, and their first point of business was to develop a new structure and template for the policy solutions form that we would be using, and bringing that forward in a draft form so that we can bring that to council for council's input and discussion, and then being able to move forward with the rest of the policies in that regard, and then following up with the performance management.
Thank you.
So it's based on their timelines and timelines to meet with us and have input on a regular basis as well.
Councillor?
Okay, that's clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the HR? I had a question on that, and Ms. Pupo, it doesn't appear on this. When is maybe it's at the very end, at the very bottom, but in terms of council's involvement, when can we look forward to seeing some of this work come to us?
We're currently just working on the template and the form-based revisions to the policy solutions manual. And once that is kind of established, we will bring in that report to council for input on how to move forward with the rest of the policies at that time. So I think that we are close to bringing something forward and having council's input into that process.
Okay. In terms of where that appears in the timeline, is that within phase 1 or is that phase 3? Could you just be a little more specific?
I think
please?
that would be within phase 1.
Oh, okay.
So that we don't move forward with the development of all the policies until council has agreed to the template and the overriding umbrella that we're going to use to move forward.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else on that? There being none, Councillor Durley, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I found it of particular interest, the regional tax rate ratios report that was submitted by the region of Niagara, and of particular interest was the fact that we are the tax collectors for the region, and that almost $12.5 million in general levy is collected by the city or by the town of Pelham to forward at 4 times during the year to the region, as well as a $1.2 million almost in water and wastewater stuff. So it's almost $13 million that we collect on behalf of the region, and our staff is doing a terrific job in doing that, and I'm sure the region very much appreciates that. But I thought that was worthy to bring forward, that a little over $13 million that are paid in taxes to this office go to Chalone Parkway. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor. I'm glad you raised that issue, not necessarily about the collection part, but about the rates part. There was, and this was covered in the media and was part of the Property Assessment Taxation Review Committee. There was a change at Regional Council regarding one of the rates, and that is called commercial residual high band, and that was affecting one property. Council will recall that one of the casino properties saw a major devaluation in its property value from Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and Regional Council decided to try to capture what was lost, really $3 million for the region and another $2.6 million for the city of Niagara Falls, or maybe a bit higher actually for the city of Niagara Falls. So it established something called the commercial residual rate, and any properties that were valued at higher than $125 million in that category of commercial would be then have to pay an additional value on top, and I think it was 2.8 times what the normal rate is for everything above the 125 million. That captures one property and one property only, and that's the, we'll call the new casino. So Regional Council did make that change, and it's slightly different than the information that's before us, so I did want to highlight that to Council. And that change will ensure that all of the property taxes that property paid in previous years will still be received by both the city and the region. Anything else on the property assessment review portion? Okay. Is there anything else on any of the other matters that are before us? Okay, there being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King. The correspondence from Patty and Paul Fagan, Angela Carter, Karen Grimmel, dated March 31st, 2013, regarding the installation of a bicycle rack on Pelham Street, be received and referred to staff for evaluation and recommendation, and that copies be circulated to the Downtown Beautification Committee and the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking for clarification more than anything else. My understanding from correspondence is that there is an issue with regard to parking in front of the CIBC in a location where parking is apparently not allowed. I'm not entirely familiar with the geography, but it's interesting that we've received a recommendation for a solution to the problem from the public, which is excellent, but I'm wondering why we perhaps wouldn't have dealt with that problem if we were aware of it, had we been aware of it prior to this time, as a matter of business within the town.
Can you ask two questions there? Who can help? Mr. Mantle, can you help us about what's being proposed here and talk about the geography of the area? We don't have a sketch in front of us, but can you just
Certainly. I think we have several just single type bike racks out there on along Pelham Street, and I think there's some on Highway 20 also. So this would be, I think, something a little more elaborate, maybe hold several bikes at once and probably occupy one of those locations that appears to be a parking stall but is not really a parking stall.
Okay, thank you. Does that help, Councillor?
My understanding is that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but my understanding is that, in fact, for some little time, because it hasn't been there that long, we've been handing out tickets and providing warnings. I don't know whether that's the case. That's my understanding. And if that was the case, then of course we'd be aware that there was an issue there. Just wondering whether the definition of that problem hadn't come forward and some response to it.
To use the parlance, maybe it was a golden egg that we hadn't yet hatched. Mr. CEO, can you comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the councillor's question, I have no specific answer to that. I think this has been a request that's come from the public that, like the Public Works Manager indicated, there are bike racks located on Pelham, so I think the need was identified and dealt with, but perhaps the issue is that there's not enough, which is something that we'll take a look at and come back with our recommendation to council.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Councillor, that as the letter indicates, it's the intention of Ms. Fagan with her business and others that Pelham evolve into and grow into a bicycle-friendly community destination. And I know I've had discussions with Ms. Fagan about some of the exciting opportunities that she's uncovered. So I think she's trying to capitalize on that and make a very positive suggestion. So I think it's better to embrace the positive suggestion than to say, how come we didn't think about it before? So, you know, I'm very pleased with the recommendation before us. Councillors, anything further?
No, I think it's an excellent idea too, and it's not a question of being critical of the idea or indeed of the nature of the solution. But had we been in fact experiencing an issue for some time, for some little time, that we were aware of it, I'm really pleased that the solution comes from the public, and just wondering whether we mightn't have been able to take more initiative on it ourselves in town. And that's really all my comment is.
And I would say that hopefully through the creative problem-solving process that we're continuing to be engaged in, more creative solutions will come forward from both staff and the public. Anything further on this particular item? I'm going to ask a question about the timing. I would presume that when folks wrote this letter that they would hope that it could be acted upon quickly. So how long will this evaluation and recommendation take, Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I defer to Mr. Mantle on that.
Mr. Mantle, can we have something?
Immediately.
We can have something back to our May meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to that. Anything else? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. We look forward to that at our May meeting. Thank you. The next item, thank you, has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the action communication letter from the Royal Canadian Army Cadets 613 be received, and that the request that the town donate the use of the Pelham Marina facilities for the Cadet Corps annual review ceremony on Saturday, June 1st, 2013, including the community hall and kitchen area and 3 change rooms, be approved, conditional that written documentation be provided to the Recreation, Culture and Wellness Department, and all necessary insurance and applicable permits be obtained, and that the commanding officer of 613 Royal Canadian Army Cadets be so advised. This is a wonderful ceremony to attend. I've had the pleasure of being there. It's going to be a very busy day on Saturday, June 1st, given the activities that are going on in other parts of the town. Any further comments, questions on this? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is presentation consideration of reports. I have one report, very brief and to the point, but certainly very heartfelt. Congratulations to Albert and Judy Haste on their 50th anniversary. They had the celebration held on April 13th, 2013, just this past Saturday. Interestingly, 50 years ago on a Saturday was April 13th. It was a great gathering of friends and family at the Fenwick Lions Hall. On Saturday afternoon, they had a slideshow with pictures, and they tended to celebrate through the years, showing their 25th and 40th, etc. So congratulations and best wishes to Albert and Judy Haste, and we wish you many, many more years together. The next item is staff reports requiring action. It has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the issue sheet regarding the erection of a pylon sign within the required setback from Newport Signs as agent for Larry Baggio Family of Physicians be received, and that the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That permission to erect a new sign at 155 Regional Road 20 having a 1 meter setback be approved. Comments, questions on this? Very straightforward. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And we look forward to that activity occurring. The next item has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King, that the ward boundary review study issue sheet be received, and the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows: that the town of Pelham accept the proposal submitted by Watson and Associates to conduct the ward boundary review process as outlined in their proposal dated March 14th, 2013 as amended, and that the cost of the review, $20,453, be funded through development charges. Comments or questions regarding the review? Just for clarity, Madam Clerk, the intention is that this work be done with involvement of the public, of course, and in place prior to the end of this year. Is that correct?
To answer the mayor's question, yes, that is correct. We would need to have a bylaw in place before September. Actually, we want to have the bylaw in place if there are changes to be made, so that we permit the required appeal period and then time for any OMB hearing. So then it would take place for January 1st if changes are made.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried, and we look forward to that study being completed with the public's involvement. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King, that the water and wastewater life cycle capital study issue sheet be received, and that the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. The council approve a study on water and wastewater life cycle and capital contributions to be performed by Watson and Associates, and that the amount of $15,851 be funded with the approved development charge study the approved development charge study amount of $50,000. Comments or questions? It's important to update the study, which is 7 years old, I believe. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that Council receive the issue sheet exemption from certain lands from part lot control, the village of Chestnut Ridge, and that the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. The Council consider approval of the required bylaw to exempt certain lands in registered plan number 59M348 from part lot control listed on this evening's agenda. So those items are on a bylaw later on in the evening, and there's a map here. Any comments or questions from members of Council? Glad that staff caught this error and omission. There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that Council receive the issue sheet regarding the application to enter into a site plan control agreement with Doug Tucker Construction Limited, 550 Weber Road, and that the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That for reasons outlined in issue sheet, application to enter into a site plan control agreement with Doug Tucker Construction Limited, Council approve the proposed site plan control agreement application SP02/12 Doug Tucker Construction, and further that Council consider the required bylaw by authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign a site plan agreement between the town of Pelham and Doug Tucker Construction Constructed Limited, and that's listed on later on this evening's agenda. Information report. Questions from members of council? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that Council receive the issue sheet regarding the designation of the Fenwick flagpole property located at the intersection of Canberra Road and Maple Street in the former village of Fenwick, and that the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That staff be directed to serve a notice of intention to designate on the Ontario Heritage Trust and to post a notice in the local newspaper as per the requirements under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that staff be directed to prepare a designation bylaw if no objections are filed during the objection period, and to present council with such a bylaw at the May 21st, 2013 meeting. This is to make a deadline. Comments, questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And we look forward to hearing from the public if they want to comment. The next item, presentation and consideration of bylaws, and as we heard, we have a few of them. So it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that leave now be given to introduce the following bylaws and dispense with the reading of the bylaw. Being a bylaw to release certain lands from site plan agreement, Donald Creppy and Thomas Creppy, 529 Weber Road. 2, being a bylaw to set the rates of taxation for the year 2013. 3, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a site plan agreement with Doug Tucker Construction Limited for the property known municipally as 550 Weber Road, and to repeal and replace bylaw 1646, that was in 1994, and bylaw 1687, also in 1994. 4, being a bylaw to provide for the stopping and closing and stopping up of part of a road allowance between lots 19 and 20, concession 10, from Foss Road to approximately 1547 feet north of Foss Road, Part 3 on reference plan 59R14777, and to authorize conveyance thereof. 5, being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up of a part of the road allowance in the same area, extending northerly approximately 605 feet, being Part 2 on the reference plan, and to authorize the conveyance thereof. And 6, being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up of the same area between lots 19 and 20, concession 10, from Foss Road to approximately 218 feet north of Foss Road, being Part 1 on the reference plan 14777, and to authorize the conveyance thereof. And finally, number 7, being a bylaw to exempt certain lands in registered plan number 59M 348 from part lot control pursuant to Section 50 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990. Discussion on any of those items. Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier this evening, of course, we had a public meeting with respect to the Langendoon-Rosinski requests for stopping up the road allowance. I'm assuming the request came from them. I'm not sure that I fully understood the presentation that Mr. Rosinski made, but I think that he was asking that we reconsider stopping the road allowance in consideration of the potential of the oak tree in the area. And I guess my question is really, have we any definition of what it is that was being asked for that differs from this? I'm a little unclear, I guess, as to what it is that was being requested.
Thank you. From hearing Mr. Rosinski earlier, I think he indicated his preference to postpone this road allowance and to the conveying of the road allowance and selling it off to the sides, pending a discussion between the town and the parties. And he indicated himself, his sister-in-law, and who owns also in part owns one of the properties, and the other potential owner, the Langendoons. Madam Clerk, perhaps is that your understanding as well? I don't know if you can review your notes from that
Actually, I can go back to that.
portion of the meeting. If you just bear with us and
He suggested that it would be worthwhile reviewing the bylaw, or postponing the bylaw, because they may wish to have access to the tree, and he wanted to have all options known. He suggested a meeting with all parties to decide the future of the tree, and that the tree is actually situated about 200 feet from the road allowance on his personal property. Mr. Mantle may have some further information on the file as well
okay, thank you.
as to process, sir.
Mr. Mantle, anything to add?
Just that Mr. Rosinski's been part of the process from the very beginning. When we started, I think it's 2010 that we started this process, and it's dragged on a bit, but I think he's also benefiting from the road allowance. So this is somewhat new to us, that he's interested in the oak tree now too.
Okay, thank you. So I think his request, from hearing the clerk, was that a meeting be convened, and that the issue be, I think you said, postponed until.
I just need to make sure that that's actually what he said. If you just bear
Okay,
with me a
go ahead.
moment.
That might be my word.
He said, before the town makes their final decision, he asked that they consider that the road allowance in the future could be used as an access to a future heritage site or some kind of park around the tree. Although we can't predict the future on how long the tree will be there, it would be worthwhile giving thought on whether we should have access to the tree and having all options known. And again, he clarified that the tree is about 200 feet from the actual road allowance on his personal property. So he didn't make a specific ask.
Did he ask for a meeting? Is that correct?
He asked for a meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Hope that helps.
It does help, and if I may, first of all, congratulate our clerk on her tremendous listening abilities and writing abilities. I'm always impressed by that. But second, we are clearly looking at a final decision today if we pass this bylaw. So I wonder whether some purpose might be served in our giving ourselves the opportunity to think about what was presented today. I don't know whether I'm convinced one way or the other with respect to what it was that was presented, because really this is the first time I'm hearing it. I know a report was presented to this council in May, I think it was, of 2010. That was before my time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that others on council have the benefit of that report or an understanding of it. So I'm wondering what procedurally I need to move to ask for a postponement of that consideration until we've had a chance to kind of understand what that request was and what the issues are. Because really, I don't fully understand them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I believe it would be to postpone those three items, whether it be now or at first reading or later on the agenda. Madam Clerk, what's your recommendation on that?
I would suggest that you do it now and then, because they don't need first reading if you're going to postpone them.
Okay.
And the second, third reading would just be to number them, and we'll just have to renumber the next
Okay.
bylaw.
Okay, so the clerk is indicating if you wanted to do that, Councillor, and would find a seconder, it would be to postpone those items number 4, 5, and 6. And I believe there was also a request for a meeting, so that could be part of your motion, but that would be up to you, sir.
That would be my motion, Mr. Mayor, that we postpone and that we find an opportunity to meet on the issues just for clarification, so that would inform our decision when we finally get to it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Clark? Any discussion in terms of time, or your recommendation is until the next council, or to try to?
Well, I'm not aware of the issue sufficiently to know what the pressure of time is. It's been sitting around since 2010. I suspect if it sat around for another month or 2 months or 3 months, it wouldn't kill anything, unless of course we need the money from the sale and the taxes from its use.
Come back to Mr. CEO, in
Thank
terms
you,
of timing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that 2 weeks is adequate to hold a meeting, and then it would either be an update in the COW report from the Public Works Director, or we would put it back on as an agenda item if resolution has been
Okay.
achieved.
So until our next meeting, which is May 6th or 5th, something like that. Okay. So, Councillor Durley?
Thank
to
you,
the
Mr.
motion?
Mayor. Yes, to the motion. I'm just wondering if, in fact, the Heritage Advisory Committee should be party to this meeting in order that if, in fact, there is a future designation in the works, that they would be able to refer to the Heritage Act as to a process that may need to happen and that. And, I'm just wondering if that would be prudent at this particular time, if the end result is the desire to have this designated as a heritage site.
Okay, no, and I guess, Councillor, it's a great idea. The issue before us is the road allowance and whether to convey that to the property owners. And then the other issue is designation of a heritage asset on a property that's owned not by the town but by someone else. So, Mr. CAO, in terms of the heritage component, can you comment? Can this be sent to them for their information and encourage that they speak to the landowner? Is that sort of the best course of action?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that it may be premature to involve the Heritage Committee until we clearly understand what the issues are. The presentation was a little ambiguous. I'm not sure that was the intent of the delegation, was to start talking about heritage designations. So
okay.
I think I'd like to have the opportunity to conduct the meeting and then determine whether or not the Heritage Committee is to be involved.
Okay. Councillor Durley, you're fine with that?
Thank
okay.
you.
Anything further? All right, I'm going to call the question on the postponement. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried, and we look forward to that meeting and this coming back to us. Anything else on any of the other items? I'm going to call the question on that save and accept for 4, 5, and 6, which have been postponed. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you.
Take the last three numbers off, and
Thank
I will
you.
renumber
Okay.
this one back.
Maybe
Okay.
the clerk has indicated to me that she will renumber the bylaws, which is the next step. And so it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the following bylaws have been considered first time, be numbered as follows: Bylaw 3,365 through to Bylaw 3,368 be now considered a second and third time and passed, and the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of council to the contrary notwithstanding. Any discussion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Council does have a closed session, an in-camera session, but we will, as we tend to do, recess that and reconvene immediately following our committee meeting. So that's what this motion is. Moved by Councilor Ribbiak, seconded by Councilor King, that Council recess the in-camera portion of the meeting and reconvene immediately following the Policy and Priorities Committee meeting scheduled for later this evening. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And now we'll take a 5-minute recess before we start PNP. Thank you.